Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. As a rule, I do not use notes, but I will be using them this time because I want to make sure that what I say is accurate and that I don't make any mistakes. So I will put on my spectacles and begin making this episode with my eyeglasses on. I have said that I will do this at some point in the future. When I said that, I did not know when. I thought possibly months, possibly years. I didn't know. Um, it's been months. And all this time, I have been praying and trying to come up with a way of doing this properly so I don't make any mistakes. I mean, I knew what I wanted to say, but the way I say it is, I think, perhaps even more important than what I actually say. So um, that is how I wanted to introduce this episode of my podcast. And then we will go on and I will make this presentation. And to be honest, I am somewhat nervous. And I don't know why I'm somewhat nervous, but I am. If you can tell that, good, I guess. If not, good, doesn't matter. But I am somewhat nervous. Okay. I am a member of the Baha'i faith. If you've heard of it, it is a religion which was started in the 19th century in Iran by a man named Baha'u'llah, who claimed to be the promised one of all religions. I love Baha'u'llah very, very deeply. You may have heard me mention Horia before, without mentioning the source of it. Horia is a Holy Spirit mentioned by Baha'u'llah and referenced by the guardian of the Baha'i faith, Shoghi Effendi. She is a wonderful being. Shoghi Effendi translates Horia as maiden. I translate it more elaborately, my own personal provisional translation, as black-eyed maiden of white light. In Turkish, Horia is Hori, and in Persian, Horia is Hori. So Horia, Hori, or Huri, it's the same basic word, black-eyed maiden of white light. A being I love very deeply. I have described my relationship with her in the past, how much I feel that she is with me and guiding me. And I prayed to Horia to give me guidance about whether to make this presentation and how to do it. And I hope that I am doing it in accordance with her wishes, in accordance with her guidance. She is an actual being, in my view. She is not a metaphor. She is a being, but not a human. She is a Holy Spirit who occupies what is called in the Baha'i writings the Valley of Wonderment, what the Old Testament calls Jacob's Ladder. She is a great and glorious being, one whom I have a constant relationship with, and one whom I am looking forward to being with in the world to come. That makes me literally look forward to dying. That does not mean I am suicidal, I am not, but I do look forward to being in the next world. Maybe that's a better way to put it. I look forward to being in the next world, not to dying per se. Okay. I am a Baha'i, as I said. but I am also a sociologist. And the reason I have been making the discussions I've been making, and the reason why I have been so concerned about the events in Gaza, is because of both my membership in the Baha'i faith and my profession being a sociologist. I am retired now, but I will always be a sociologist. Here's why I waited and why I was so cautious about doing this. Most Baha'is are not Marxists or communists. Most Baha'is are certainly not Maoist third worldists. As far as I know, I am the only Maoist third worldist who is a Baha'i. Now, Maoism third worldism is a part of the sociological theory I have developed, which I've mentioned before, called dialectical metarealism. And there are 5 basic components to it. First, socialism from below, third worldism, fourth worldism, which is my own name for Maoism third worldism. It is a perspective which argues that most likely revolutions will begin in the fourth world or the indigenous world, not in the first world or the Western world. Why? Because of the concept of dialectical or revolutionary potential. The Western world or the first world is imperialist. The third world and the fourth world are victimized by first world imperialism. And it is generally the victims who rise up and who want to change. People who are victimizers generally do not want to change, or not enough of them want to change. And so it is unlikely, I think, that revolutions will start in the first world, much more likely that they will start in the third world. I will come back to that in a bit. Second, intersectional Marxism. Intersectional Marxism, which is discussed in detail by the scholar Ashley Bohrer, is a modification of intersectionality as developed by Kimberly Crenshaw and Patricia Hill Collins to accommodate Marxism. It's a Marxist rewriting of intersectionality. So as I see it, the intersections are intersections between thoroughfares or highways. Those highways are oppressions like racism, like sexism, like ableism, like ageism, and so on. Then those intersections are on a map. The map can be called intersectionality. It can also be called capitalism or the capitalist world system. Either way. So the overall structure is capitalism. What the intersections and the thoroughfares or highways do is they allow us to talk about the multiple contradictions which exist in the capitalist world system. And there are many. And so by focusing on intersections between oppressions, we can distinguish between people based on whether they are oppressed, whether they are oppressors, and either way, how much they are oppressed and how much they are oppressors. So it's both a matter of position and a matter of degree. That, I think, is the beauty of intersectional Marxism, at least as I have conceived of it. So it is a Marxist framework. The original intersectionality developed by Kimberly Crenshaw was not Marxist per se. The best evidence of that was that Kimberly Crenshaw placed class on the same level as race and gender. Class should never be placed on the same level as race and gender. Class is the substructure. Class is intersectionality. Race and gender are among its many thoroughfares. So you don't put the map on the same level as the thoroughfare itself. They're entirely different things. They are certainly related, but they should not be conflated or confused with one another. Second, kyriarchy. I guess third, kyriarchy. Kyriarchy is a modification of intersectionality and intersectional Marxism to move beyond the usual structures or thoroughfares discussed in intersectional Marxism and more broadly in intersectionality itself. What kyriarchy does is it expands the notion of those thoroughfares to accommodate things such as imperialism, colonialism, and cultural hegemony, which were not a part of the original intersectionality. And so that is why I have included that in my dialectical meta-realism, because I think that any genuine Marxist intersectionality needs to also make room for those additional sources of oppression, especially imperialism. Imperialism is the major contradiction of capitalism. So without imperialism, I don't see how we can ever anticipate a change to the current capitalist world system. And if there is anything that I want, it is a change. It is a radical change to the capitalist world system. The overthrowing in some way, and I don't know how. When I say overthrowing, I don't necessarily mean violent, although that is possible. I'm not going to say it's yes, say yes or no, just maybe, maybe not, and leave it there. All I know is that there need to be revolutions. Why? Because without revolutions, there will not be change. You cannot bring about a new system like Maoism, third worldism, or communism through evolution. You need to make radical changes to the existing system, basically replace the capitalist world system with a new socialist or communist world system. Next, Antifa, often mispronounced as Antifa. Antifa is an acronym for anti-fascism, which clarifies what Antifa is. Antifa, I don't know, is a game, puzzle. It's confusing, but Antifa is not. When you hear Antifa, you can literally complete it in your head. With Antifa, I literally would not know what to do with it. It makes no sense to me. In my own version of Antifa, what I do is primarily focus on the oppression of the third and fourth worlds. By the first world, by the United States, by NATO, by other countries, which are literally committing genocide against the third world and the fourth world, or are engaging in other types of oppression. We can see that, of course, in the events now taking place in Gaza, but not only in Gaza. Colonialism has been a goal of the American empire for a long time. And that is why the agent of the American empire, Israel, is now doing what it wants. Certainly, President Biden has stopped providing Israel with money and militia for now, but he has supported Israel's war on Gaza in the past. And so it is hard really to know exactly in which place he stands. I don't know. I literally don't know. I am as confused as anyone. I wish I were not, because I feel that, especially as a sociologist, I should have a better handle on this, and I genuinely do not. And that is very troublesome to me. So for me, being Antifa means objecting to hegemony, objecting to imperialism, and even more so, objecting to genocide. One cannot be, in my view, an Antifa without having a strong stand against genocide. And genocide is the number one objective I have. The elimination of it in making these podcasts. It is also the reason I am a part of the vanguard of the Bund, which is a Jewish-oriented anti-Zionist movement. But more especially, it is pro-indigenous. It is pro-Palestinian. And it regards the actions of Israel as an intrusion on indigenous land, and hopes for the day when Palestine will be returned to the Palestinians and the genocide against them will come to a stop. I am not very optimistic that that day will come that soon, but I hope it will, at least sooner or later. Now, underlying the four different aspects of dialectical meta-realism I have mentioned is the critical realism of Roy Bhaskar. That is the center of what I call the pentad. The pentad meaning five, right? Five different elements. That underlies the other four. Roy Bhaskar's critical realism, which I've discussed many times before, is a methodology for establishing a new type of governance, a governance based on equality, a governance based on communism. That is what Roy Bhaskar wanted. He called it a concrete utopia, to distinguish it, I think, from what Engels objected to about utopianism or utopian socialism, that it was not grounded sufficiently. Roy Bhaskar's concept of concrete utopia is grounded very strongly on the concepts that he sets forth in critical realism. Now, I will not go into those in detail here. If you're interested, you could go back and look at my previous podcasts. It would simply take too much time to review those right now. But simply stating that it is a methodology for achieving communism, or in my view, a methodology for Maoism, third worldism, is for the present sufficient. And I hope you will, if you do not know what it is, go back and review the videos I have made in the past, specifically on the critical realism of Roy Bhaskar. So that is the basis of dialectical meta-realism. It's much more complex than that. There is a book that I am writing, which is linked in the discussion section right below this video, called Eudaimonic Utopia. I would strongly hope that you would read that book, or at least as much of it as you can. because it is in that book that I set forth this sociological theory. Be aware that I am not talking about a political position. This is not politics. It is sociology. I am not a political scientist. I am a sociologist, a retired sociology professor. So what I do as a sociologist is I try to explain how society works. And as a Marxist sociologist, I try to explain how society can work in a way that will advance the benefits of the workers and lead to a type of, again, as Roy calls it, a concrete utopia, which I hope will start in the near future, but I have no way of knowing that. Now, let me say that I'm only speaking for myself. That should be clear, but I want to emphasize that anyway. The views I am setting forth are only my views. I certainly am not speaking for all sociologists, nor am I speaking for all Baha'is. Most Baha'is are not communists. Most Baha'is are certainly not Maoist third worldists. So my views are my views, and that is all. Nothing more, nothing less. Just what I personally think about how the world is and how the world should be transformed. Transformation is an integral component of Roy Bhaskar's critical realism. And I look to Roy Bhaskar's critical realism whenever I am thinking about transformation. So again, my work is academic. This is my continuing academic work as a sociologist after I have retired from my professorship. As I see it, one can be a retired professor, but one cannot be a retired sociologist. One is always a sociologist. One cannot give that up or put it up on a shelf and ignore it. I am engaging in these activities, such as these podcasts, these anti-genocide podcasts, based upon the guidance of the supreme governing body of the Baha'i Faith, the Universal House of Justice. Again, let me state, this is only my understanding. I am not claiming to be an authority on what the Universal House of Justice has said. I am trying to understand what they have said, and I will read to you what they have said so you can make up your minds for yourselves. But again, it's just my own view. My own view. That is it. It is not a Baha'i view. There is no Baha'i sociology. There is no such thing as Baha'i sociology. And certainly Marxism is not a part of the Baha'i faith. Marxism is a part of me. It defines me just as the Baha'i faith defines me, but I would not conflate them with one another. To do so, I think, would be fair to each one of them. They both deserve to be treated respectfully on their own, not by combining them with one another, not by reducing one to the other. I have seen people who are Baha'is who have tried to combine the Baha'i faith with Marxism. And what usually happens is they end up with a kind of watered down Marxism. That is the danger of that approach, which is why I do not advocate combination. I advocate collaboration, and I advocate discussion, or in other words, keeping the roads open so that both sociology and the Baha'i faith, in my case, can have a communion with one another, but not that they will become the same. They are different things. Sociology is an academic field, a social science. The Baha'i faith is a religion, and I think that they should remain in their own proper territories. So, based upon the guidance of the Universal House of Justice, which, as I said, I will read to you, I have decided that I would work with the Bund, which opposes that genocide against the Palestinians. And I would do these podcasts and write my current book, Eudaimonic Utopia, again as a protest against genocide, against imperialism, colonialism, and cultural hegemony. These are statements made by the Universal House of Justice, not by me. Quote, the support of passage of the Genocide Convention in the United States Senate referred to in your letter is a case in point. The particular circumstances which influenced the National Spiritual Assembly's involvement in the matter were delicate and compelling. There may be other situations in which significant questions being considered by a government are so intimately related to fundamental principles of our faith, and the conditions are such that the maintenance of strict neutrality on the part of the Baha'i community to an individual believer would not be in the best interests of either the Baha'i faith or society. Awareness of this probability should, however, not cause the Friends to go on a tangent and take such sensitive matters into their own hands. In any such situation, the National Spiritual Assembly must carefully weigh the consequences, pro and con, of any contemplated action and carry out its decision, preferably with the foreknowledge of the House of Justice. The Friends must learn to appreciate this new situation, to acquiesce to the prerogative of their elected institutions to decide on questions involving or affecting relations with their governments, and evince confidence in the incontrovertible promise of Baha'u'llah to protect his community. Baha'u'llah was the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith and one whom I deeply love. He is to me, like Muhammad, like Jesus, like Moses, like Krishna, like the Buddha and others. But he is the manifestation or prophet of God for this age. And he brings guidance which is relevant to this age. The Universal House of Justice is a part of his covenant or agreement with humanity, that he would not leave humanity alone. And so the House of Justice continues to guide us. And as you saw in that portion of the letter I just read, part of that guidance is anti-genocide. I mean, honestly, I do not see how one can be a human being and support genocide. Maybe I'm wrong. But to me, as I've said before, being human implies humanity. If one does not have humanity, one is not really a human being. One may be a Homo sapiens sapien, but not a human being per se. And I know that I want to be a human being because I believe that when I die, I will stand before God and be judged. And I want to be judged fairly, and I do not want to do things that may cause me to be judged adversely. That is why I do what I do, because I always have the fear of God. I know that God, if he wants to, can punish me. And I want to avoid punishment and to receive God's mercy. Both of those are intricate parts of justice. Mercy is the positive part, punishment is the negative part. So there you have it in the passage I read, a reference to genocide or the Genocide Convention. Let me go ahead and read an even more explicit passage by the Universal House of Justice on genocide. Quote, "The increasing attention being focused on some of the most deep-rooted problems of the planet is yet another hopeful sign. Despite the obvious shortcomings of the United Nations, the more than 200 declarations and conventions adopted by that organization, even where governments have not been enthusiastic in their commitment, have given ordinary people a sense of a new lease on life. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and similar measures concerned with eliminating all forms of discrimination based on race, sex, or religious belief, upholding the rights of the child, protecting all persons against being subjected to torture, eradicating hunger and malnutrition, using scientific and technological progress in the interest of peace and the benefit of mankind. All such measures, if courageously enforced," let me read that again, "if courageously enforced and expanded, will advance the day when the specter of war will have lost its power to dominate international relations. There is no need to stress the significance of the issues addressed by these declarations and conventions." So there you go. And I have left out a lot. I have included those parts I thought were important, or at least more important than other parts. Others may disagree, but I do feel that what I have mentioned is vital for appreciating the viewpoint of the Universal House of Justice on genocide. I mean, as a community, Baha'is have been subjected to genocide. There were attempts made by particularly the Iranian government to kill Baha'is. Perhaps all Baha'is, I don't know. But massive, thousands and thousands of Baha'is were killed in the 19th century. And even more have been killed since then. It is a genuine tragedy. And I think it makes Baha'is, in particular, sensitive to the issue of genocide. And so it seems to me that the permission to discuss genocide and to condemn it is provided, especially in this second quotation that I read, because it talks about the idea of the Convention on Genocide, for example, giving people a new lease on life. And leading to the day when the specter of war will have lost its power to dominate international relations. Those things make me very happy. I have been a Baha'i since I was 14 years old. That's a long time. That is 54 years. 54 years as a Baha'i. I deeply love the Baha'i faith. I deeply love Baha'u'llah, his forerunner, the Bab, Baha'u'llah's son, Abdul Baha, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, Shoghi Effendi. All of them I love. And I must say, in my own case, and again, I am only speaking for myself, the beloved maiden, Horia, the black-eyed maiden of white light, because as I've said in previous episodes of this podcast, I believe that she awakened me from my autism. I would not be the man I am right now, a man of empathy and compassion, were it not for Horia. And I know that because before her, I had no empathy, love, compassion, or heart. I was a heartless man. A heartless man. I am no longer heartless. And therefore, when I look at the genocide being committed by the Israeli government against the Palestinians, I cannot but feel tremendous sorrow and mercy and compassion. And I wish that there were some way that I could fix that problem myself. Unfortunately, I cannot do that. I can protest in my podcast. I can engage in conscientization, critical conscience or consciousness raising in my podcast, but I cannot go and force the leaders of countries to bend to my will. I can't. I can't force them to behave like human beings. I don't have that ability. I wish I did. I really wish I did. But I assume that if I am not endowed with that power, that Baha'u'llah does not want me to have that power. Individuals have free will. We all have our own agency. And we will be judged by God for how we use that agency, for what our will is, for whether we are kind and generous to others, especially the poor and the oppressed, like the Gazans, who have not committed any crime, but still reside in a penal colony and are now being exterminated as if they were rats. There is nothing I can imagine that is more disgusting to me than the genocide, or, if you wish, ethnic cleansing, which is now taking place in Gaza. And so I hope I am right in doing this. I hope so. As I said, I wanted to wait for the right time. It's always good to look down before you jump off a bridge. Make sure that there is water, not concrete. And that's what I've been doing. I've been looking down. I've been trying to figure out how best to approach this subject, because I want to be careful that I don't have people conflate my own views with the official views, if there are any, of the Baha'i community. My views are just my own. But I do think that genocide, since it was condemned in such stark language by the Universal House of Justice, is an issue that I have a duty to speak out on. And honestly, as a Baha'i, the reason for all that I have done, the reason for my podcasts, the reason for my involvement with the Bund as a part of its vanguard, the reason I am writing my current book, Eudaimonic Utopia, is because of Baha'u'llah, is because of Horia, is because of the Universal House of Justice. The guardian of the Baha'i faith, Shoghi Effendi, died in 1957, but he is still with us. He did not leave a will. The reason, while not fully known, is, I think, clear, at least to me, because he was not going anywhere. He is still the head of the Universal House of Justice. He had no successor, so he remains the guardian. He remains the guardian. And so when I have turned to the guardian and have turned to the Universal House of Justice, this is the guidance I have gotten to make this presentation. And I hope that it is appreciated in the right way. I don't mean liked, but I mean appreciated in the sense of understood in the right way. That I am not trying to make a political statement. I am trying to make a statement against the genocide which is being committed right now by the Israeli government, and which has, until recently, been financed by the US. And so I do believe that it is possible that both my own country, the US, and Israel will stand before the throne of God and be judged. And I would not want to be in that position. As an American, perhaps I will be, because I do think that there is a kind of collective punishment, but I hope that my work will at least excuse me to a degree. And so I would encourage you, my viewer, to make podcasts against the Israeli genocide as well, or do other work along that line. Attend the student protests, which I cannot do because the protests are not announced in advance in order to prevent what people think are outside agitators from infiltrating the protests. So I have no way of knowing when a protest will occur in advance. I hear about the protests afterwards. That is sad to me, but I understand it. So I guess I will leave it there. I will only say that since I have now broached the topic of my religion, which I didn't before, and so I have held back from mentioning it in the past, I will now mention it in the future, because I feel like I now have the freedom to do so now that I have made my position clear. And if someone asks, I can always refer them back to this particular episode and hope that they will read it, or rather listen to it, and understand it. But that's all I can do. I am doing my best. I know my best is not sufficient, but I am doing my best. God bless all of you. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.